Hello everybody and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program, where I'm reasonably happy with this lander that we designed in the last episode, with one major caveat. And that caveat is this moon transfer stage here is pretty underpowered. So I want to make a couple of alterations here. Now, the Rockamax brand adapter here, it's purely cosmetic, right? I'm not sure if it actually has any physical aerodynamic properties to it. I'm actually going to remove it for now. We may put it back in a moment, but I'm going to fully remove this stage. Reason being, I want to upgrade this to Rockamax. So we're going to have this be a Rockamax 32 tank here. And we're also going to have this be an upgraded Poodle engine as opposed to the Terrier engine. So that's a much bigger engine. Obviously, we've got a bit of a transfer of size here issue. Wow, those are words. Those are definitely words. They're just not particularly good ones. We've got a bit of an issue here in terms of our rocket diameter, right? We know that there's a size discrepancy here, and that's maybe okay. Now, the question is, how much exactly does that Rockamax brand adapter weigh? That weighs 0.1 tons. It's a lot worse for us to have that adapter up here in terms of raw DV than to have it down here. Just because we're going to be shedding it substantially earlier. So I think we just omit the part entirely. Now, of course, we're going to need some, what is this, TD25 decouplers? Yeah, we're going to need a TD25 decoupler there. That's fine. And I'm going to rerun these struts to be quad symmetry if we can. There we go, quad symmetry, and we're going to run that to be right up like that. A little straighter, hopefully. Something along these lines. Now, this will be a substantial increase in our thrust-to-weight ratio here. Or rather, more specifically, a substantial increase, I believe, in our vacuum flight here. So if we bump this up, this is stage 7 here that we're interested in. So our current DV is 568 at sea level, right? And we're seeing the same amount from the stock toolbar here, so that's great. We're going to bump this up, and we can see here that in space, we've got 2200 DV. This is a substantial improvement. What is our thrust to weight like in our first stage? Honestly, about right. I think our thrust to weight is good. We no longer need to back off on our thumper power because we're lifting a heavier transfer stage. Now, yes, this transition here is ugly, but I think, honestly, because of the tanks sticking out anyway, I think up here it's fine visually. The only question I have is, what does this do aerodynamically? So let's run one final test here. A simulation of this new change. Oh, I didn't double check our staging. That's probably something that I should do. But let's run one final check here of our actual performance. I want to check aerodynamics here. I want to check our liftoff speed, and I want to check our final apoapsis when this stage is burned out. Okay, so let's give this a go, shall we? I want to test our stability as well. Throttle all the way up. I was slightly late on that throttle up, so we wasted a little bit of solid fuel there, but that's fine. It was less than a second to burn, I think, or maybe about a second to burn. We've got a decent acceleration curve going on here. Let's hop into orbital mode. Let's test aerodynamics. Aerodynamics are feeling reasonable. Yeah, that seems okay for now. A little bit on the stable side, but our SRBs are going to be coming off quite soon, and that will, of course, adjust that pretty dramatically. SRBs are off. Okay, so with the SRBs off, that, of course, changes our center of mass here. That seems to make us a little bit iffy on our turn speed. Okay. Our acceleration through the atmosphere here is maybe a little low as well. Yeah, we're definitely having some attitude issues now that our SRBs are gone. Okay, that is noted. We're going to revert that back, And that is something that is fixable. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to strut this up, because I have a bit of concerns about how this right here is actually connecting together. Can we strut this maybe from here to here? Close enough. Okay, so there's that. Now I'm going to look into perhaps putting in an ASAS up here. I'm going to put it down below. I don't like the sizing discrepancy there. Okay, that makes us a little bit taller on our return stage, but that should be okay. And now the question is, what's our power levels look like? Once we can upgrade this skipper to a mainsail, things will look substantially better. I want to point that out. We can't do that currently, but that is a future upgrade that we're looking at. And that will increase our thrust to weight dramatically on that first stage. So the first stage being ever so slightly underpowered isn't awful. What was awful there was the first stage having attitude issues. And that might have something to do with wanting additional tail fins. We'll see how it feels on this flight. Which, once again, this is simulated, by the way. We have not graduated into real flights yet, but I'm just seeing for now what the addition of the ASAS has actually done here, as well as that strutting up there. SAS is super powerful in KSP, and yeah, I am already feeling it. That is a ludicrous amount of maneuverability. Like, honestly, I feel like they need to nerf that in stock KSP. Okay. I also want to look into these solar panels, which I think are going to be occluded by our fuel tanks right now. Let's ditch that, and... Ooh, whoa! I didn't check my staging, did I? I believe we had a staging issue there, where it detached this stage as well. Yeah, that's exactly what happened. Also known as I am a moron and didn't check my staging. Well, good thing that was a simulation. And we will try that again. I definitely want that much more powerful transfer stage, though. And that transfer stage, honestly, we're probably going to be able to mostly land on, too. It's kind of broken with how much more powerful it is now. So we should be just fine on that. We don't need RCS, but yeah, I'm definitely concerned about the positioning of our solar panels right now. There's no doubt about that. They are problematically located. We will adjust that after this flight. Which, once again, is a simulated one. Excellent. So we're just testing to see how this actually feels when we have, you know, no decoupling issues. Okay, we're going to head on over. Once again, I'm very interested in seeing what our total speed is like after this first stage. Like, the second stage has more than enough if we're in orbit, right? The question is, does this get us into orbit? And I think it maybe doesn't quite. But once we have access to a mainsail, I think at that point it does. Okay, there we go. That's much better. And our actual thrust to weight here, it does dip down under 1 for a moment there. And yeah, this is definitely 1,000,000% underpowered. Let's just hold this attitude for now. And the question is, what does the apoapsis reach once this burn finishes? And then we can run a quick stress test on the prograde node in terms of aerodynamics. Then we can revert that, and we can change these photovoltaic panels positions, because I would rather them be on, like, the ASAS. I feel like that would be a lot better. Yeah, you can definitely see here that this first stage is now underpowered, now that we've added a ton of weight. Actually, more than a ton. We've added a whole lot of weight onto the Rockamax there. There's no doubt about that one. Or onto the second stage, rather. And that definitely indicates that our first stage is underpowered. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we can adjust that as well. I'm going to go ahead and test our aerodynamics here. We now know for an absolute fact that this first stage, pretty wildly underpowered. Aerodynamic test. Looks good. Okay, so aerodynamics are fine. But our first stage, underpowered. Not surprising, that result. We can upgrade from thumpers to a slightly bigger... I mean, we could go to Pollux', but I feel like they're too big. We could do kickbacks. We could do liquid fueled, but in Rockamax size for our heavy booster. I think what I'm going to try is I'm going to try Pollux's, but only dual coupling them. So what we're going to do is we're going to put in a nice radial decoupler. Actually, I'm going to put in a bigger radial decoupler here, and we will position that right about here. And then we'll try this. I mean, these things are huge, right? We know this. So actually, looking at this, we need to have our radial decoupler be more like up here. And of course, this clips in, but we're going to move that down. So we would move this down to be somewhere like here. And what's that looking like? I mean, in theory, that's okay. I mean, this is probably going to be pretty overpowered at this point, but we can scale that back. That's not an issue. This does put us overweight, which is something we need to think about. And that's too big of a nose cone. That's too small of a nose cone. That's way too small of a nose cone. That works, but it's very tall. Maybe we just don't have a nose cone. Okay, so obviously we're overweight here, like this. Now, this is not super surprising. And given the fact that we are overweight, I think we might actually want to go for liquid fueled. And we would probably want Rockamax 32s. We'd do something like this. That puts us even more overweight. Yeah, I'm not surprised by that either. Okay, let's go ahead and strut this up with the SRBs. And we're going to strut that in right... That's a really, really weird way to do the symmetry. Can we not do that? Apparently not. Can we strut this in up here? We actually don't need to strut it in up here, but... That is a weird way to do the symmetry. Okay. Let's try grabbing this part and putting this back on. And then re-grabbing our strut. There, that's more like it. So we'll strut it in up there as well as down here just to be on the safe side. I mean, down here is absolutely necessary. Up top, possibly not. We'll save that, and then I believe for the weight increase, do we need a pad upgrade? How much is that going to cost? Because we have spent a lot of money recently. Yeah, that would be a pad upgrade. We can actually afford that. So we're going to go ahead and upgrade our pad to unlimited weight. Wonderful. And with that, we can test this monstrosity. Now, this is obviously going to be pretty wildly over... Actually, it's not that wildly overpowered, now that I look at it. Okay. We'll move those together. That all happens. Yeah, this looks reasonably good, except that I want this decoupling to happen down here and at the same time as this decoupling. Okay. So our staging appears to be good now. Let's give this one final test. I'm also... Oh, right. I didn't move the solar panels either. That's okay. We will get the solar panels moved after we give this a go. This is going to be definitely interesting to see how this goes through the atmosphere. Good speed off the pad. That felt good. I like that one. Our thrust to weight here is going up very, very quickly indeed. Let's run a bit of a aerodynamic stress test here. Aerodynamic control surfaces feel good as long as we've got the Polluxes, which do of course have gimbals. However, we already know that this rocket is pretty good on the aerodynamics. we're moving pretty quick here. We can probably scale this back slightly in terms of its thrust output, because this is a little bit high at this point. I don't think we need to scale it back by much. We're definitely punching up through the atmosphere quickly here. Yeah, this is going pretty well. At this point, we can go ahead and hit prograde as a stress test. Looks good. Let's try detaching our side tanks. Good decouple. And good thrust to weight up here as well. Fantastic. We've got plenty of apoapsis height. We've still got 924 meters per second here. Okay. This all looks good. I think we can definitely scale back our SRB's thrust ever so slightly. I'm going to take it to 90% thrust, just so they burn a little longer. Okay, now I do want to move those solar panels before I forget. One thing we could do is we could actually mount the solar panels up on the experiment storage unit, which I'm actually okay with doing. We'll mount them up there. Okay, what else did we need to consider here? Overall, that seems good. I want to run one last thrust test. Since we did that thrust limiting, we'll just burn out the SRBs and determine if that's good or not. Just got to dial in that thrust to weight. Again, that's going to change, though, once we get to the mainsail. So I just want to see if we want to run at full thrust or not. So let's give this one more go, and then we'll go on our real flight to the moon. Okay, we're hitting 100 meters per second relatively quickly here. Things are looking pretty good. We're going to head on over in orbit mode towards prograde. And this time I'm not going to be just sitting up there. I'm just going to do a bit more of a realistic ascent profile here. Emphasis on the bit more realistic. Move that on up. We're seeing much less atmospheric drag going on here. We are still seeing some, and that is to be expected. Still continuing that turn over here. It's got to get a little bit steeper here. Something along the lines of this, and we'll just go ahead and hit prograde as of now. Okay, our SRBs are going to be falling off pretty soon. We can see we're getting some pretty good speed going here. Detach those SRBs, and off we go. Yeah, this is looking reasonable to me. This is looking quite reasonable. Maybe a little low on the thrust on this stage once the SRBs come off, but again, we're okay with that because we're going to be upgrading this to a mainsail, and we can probably knock another 5% off, maybe even 10% off of those SRBs once this is a mainsail. Okay, so that puts us not quite in orbit, but only a couple hundred DV away. And that should be plenty. Wonderful. Do we actually, at this point, graduate this to a real flight just for the sake of time? That kind of depends on whether I'm too late for this burn or not. Something along the lines of this. There we go. And let's just position over here. And we're just going to burn the rest of this tank before we hit space, or as we hit space, more specifically. Trying to point at the maneuver node, and yeah, I think maybe we do graduate this to a real flight just for the sake of time, so that we don't have to relaunch it again. That should be okay. And we are in orbit as of, or not in orbit, but in space as of now. Technically, we're burning this a little bit early, so we want to burn this at T-minus 47.5 seconds at this point. So 48 now. There we go. Much better timing. And we're going to be ditching this stage momentarily. Double checking our staging there. There we go. Excellent. The new Poodle model in ReStock looks pretty good. I like it. The 4 bells there. And the engine, or rather the exhaust gases coming out in a bit more of a wide cone because it's in vacuum. I like it. That's pretty neat. So we're going to continue this burn here. We are, of course, still on our way to apoapsis, and time to apoapsis is actually currently increasing a bit, but that's fine. And as I said, I'm okay with burning a little bit here for getting into orbit because we know that we're going to be able to upgrade this to a mainsail in just a little while. So this is fine. Burning a couple hundred DV out of this stage when we're targeting Moon is not a problem. But this rocket is going to be able to go quite a long ways, I would like to point out. Okay. This is not quite in orbit, and it's not quite circular either, but that's, you know, reasonably okay. Right now, we should actually be burning a little bit radial, or maybe anti-radial, just because our timing wasn't perfect, and that's okay. Our timing doesn't have to be perfect when we've got this much DV. Actually, it's anti-radial. Anti-radial. Let's get into that sweet, sweet anti-radial burn. There we go. And we'll just hold here, anti-radial, for a bit while we circularize our orbit a bit. Good enough. Okay. As I said before, that's certainly not the most efficient way to do that, but our timing and angle of attack was a bit wacky. But we do have Jebediah, Bill, and Bob here, which is who we want, so I think this is completely fine. We will go ahead and make our way over to the Moon. We will want to burn prograde probably somewhere around here, is my guess. Yeah, somewhere around here. What's that final encounter looking like? Let's get that in a little bit lower. Somewhere around 70 kilometers, I think. Actually, maybe like 50. There we go. That is a nice encounter. Fantastic. So I want to double check our Science Junior and our Service Bay. Yep, all looks good. Okay, let's get over to that maneuver node. And we should be fine on electric charge. It's not like we're going to have a shortage of that. This is right now pretty much a retrograde burn, but of course that's because of timing. This will eventually become a prograde burn, and this will be about half of our fuel in this stage, which again is perfectly okay. I don't mind that in the slightest. We used up about, what, a third of this tank getting into orbit, and that's just because we lacked the mainsail. We could theoretically up the SRBs, but the SRBs were not the issue there. The issue there was the skipper engine just wasn't quite powerful enough after the SRBs came off. So upping the power of the SRBs would just mean that we probably lost more DV to atmospheric drag, is my guess. So we're going to need to do this, of course, at T minus, let's see here, 42.5 seconds. Double checking that in my head. Yeah, 42.5 seconds. So we'll just go ahead and warp forward a bit. We'll go a little bit further than that. There we go. And we'll burn this now. Excellent. And this will give us a very nice encounter with the Moon, assuming we actually hit this correctly, which, since we can't lock to the maneuver node, is going to be a little interesting. However, I believe after this flight, Jeb will be able to lock to the maneuver node. I think he'll have the XP. So that will be great. However, I must say, we're not going to do the landing this episode. We're just going to head on over. But that's fine. We'll need to decide where we want to land and all that jazz. We're going to have to get another landing at roughly the same location for our next flight, but that's also okay. And the reason we're going to need that, of course, is because we're going to be deploying the experiments, or not experiments, but the infrastructure for experiments in a little while. Excellent. So we're doing pretty well on this burn so far. We have stayed pretty much in the node, and we have about 300 meters per second to go here. Excellent. It is, of course, by far the most efficient to adjust our periapsis right now. If we had waited until we're like here to adjust our periapsis, it would be far more expensive. So we want to make sure that we get the right periapsis here. About 50 meters per second to go here on this burn. Okay. We are, at this point, going to burn much more cautiously. And just attempt to get this exactly where we want it. I don't care too much about the inclination. We will always be able to adjust the inclination. What I'm most interested in right now is that periapsis number. That's a little much. We're going to flop over to retrograde here. And we're going to pull that back a little bit. But it's very sensitive at this distance. A tiny amount of DV does a lot. Okay, good enough. That is good enough. So at this periapsis, of course, we are going to circularize. And that'll be about right. Excellent. 256 meters per second. So we're going to go ahead and warp to here. Goodbye, Kerbal. And we are out of here. We're going to be able to do a fair amount of our landing burn with this stage too, which is handy. Oh, you know what I forgot to do? I forgot to ditch these guys. That would have saved us a little bit of DV as well. Okay, we are in space high and we can grab some of this science. So we will go ahead and get rid of these. Get rid of these. I'm a little concerned if I press space again that this isn't going to go. I'm just going to manually decouple these. Yes, they're going to go boom. We already knew that. That is a design feature. This is a feature, not a bug. Okay, there we go. There's that done. We no longer need those nose cones. Excellent. So we can run this science and we can run this maneuver, but that is all something for next episode, when we're going to do, at long last, our moon mission. You can leave your offerings to the engagement gods in the form of likes, comments, subscribes, and bell ringings, and I will see you all next time.